Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're working our way through the book of 1 Samuel, and we are almost done.
We're there,
almost done. We have two sessions, 2 weeks left.
Yep.
We're picking up in chapter 24 this week, but bring us up to speed.
Yeah, so exciting part. David's on the run, right? So he's not king yet. Well, he's been anointed, but is he king? Is he not king, right? So Saul's son, Jonathan, he and David have this special relationship going on. And David's like, your dad's trying to kill me. And Jonathan's like, oh, no.
I would know.
And then Jonathan goes, my dad's trying to kill you. So we're at the point where Jonathan knows that his dad's trying to kill him. So he and David had special plans, and we had that last week on how they would, figure it all out. But Jonathan ends up helping David, which is certainly important. And the key point, at least in my mind, is David keeps relying on God. Yeah. God, what do I do next? Should I go here? Should I not go here?
Which is a stark contrast from Saul, right?
Saul was him first, and God is an afterthought.
Yeah.
And you said that on like day one. I'm like, I'm not seeing it. And now on chapter 24, I see it.
It's like pretty obvious at this point, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So God keeps helping David at every turn, and the people know that David is the appointed one, the anointed one, but they're kind of like, well, then why is Saul still king? So there's a lot of confusion there with what's going on, and that's actually what gets resolved in this week and next week.
As we finish up 1 Samuel, it will be resolved before we get into 2 Samuel, right?
Yeah, so this week we see David continuing to keep God first in his plans. So before we get started, I got a couple questions for you. And ideally it'll fit in today. And the first one is, how do we know if something is God's will? And you want me keep going?
Yeah, right.
Well, so David talks to God, and God answers. This is the second question.
Yeah.
How come that doesn't happen today?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because
your turn.
So God's will. So I think, and this is my opinion, and I share this with a lot of people because this question comes up a lot, especially as I'm working with students. Right? College students, as I'm teaching or whatever, they're like, what's
the door
next?
opens.
Exactly. How am I supposed to know what God wants me to do after this? Whatever. And what I tell them is that I don't think that God's will is as clear-cut as sometimes we would like it to be. Mm-hmm. Right? I think and this is going to sound bad, but I think we sort of give him too much credit for, like almost
quite
like
a micromanager.
A micromanager, right? What is the next thing you want me to do?
Right. In fact, if that did happen, we'd be ticked.
Right. We'd be really mad.
Let me do my own thing.
Exactly. And nobody ever, really thinks that way. Yeah. I just want God to tell me. No, you don't. You really don't. So I think he gives us a lot of freedom. Now, yes, he has designed us. We wear these bands. I'm getting in shape.
Yep.
I think he has designed us for a category of ministry. But not like this is the specific location you're supposed to be, the specific person you're supposed to marry or work with or job you're supposed to have. I think he gives us a lot of freedom, and he calls us to live in wisdom. So we do our due diligence, we look at all of the options, and then we do something. And I think that's part of the problem is that we paralyze ourselves. Right. Say, until I have a clear picture from God, I'm not going to do anything. And God is up there like, just do something, please.
Talk to people, give.
Right.
Clean the floors.
Whatever it is, right? So I think that's really more the way it works, right? Now, in David's case, he's praying and God is audibly answering him, or there's prophets, or there's priests, or there's whatever. We live in a different dispensation. God works with us differently than he did back then. He calls us, Ephesians 5, to the principle of wisdom, right? And yes, the Holy Spirit does lead and give us insight sometimes and help us make decisions. But, he's not sending us a text that says, here's what's next in your life. And we see even in David's life recently, in previous weeks, we've seen where David said, should I do this or should I do this? Is this going to happen? Yeah, if you do that, that will happen. Okay, well, I'm going to do something else. Good job, well chosen. So even David, with God speaking to him, had the choice to act and was supposed to act with wisdom. I think that's the principle.
Yeah. And I don't know if this matters. He always approached God with not what should I do next, but my plan, David's plan is, should I go here? I'm planning on going here. Is that a good idea?
Yeah.
So you can say yes, no answer on whether he goes there versus
which I think is
the million
perfectly fits with the principle of wisdom. God, this is what I'm thinking. Help me see if this is a good choice. And in David's case, does it glorify you? Does it honor you? Which should be our thing as well.
Okay, good. So last week, you answered both those questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so last week, well, I know we talked about David. Saul came close to capturing David. In fact, he would have, except the Philistines decided to do a raid, and Saul got called back.
Right.
I mean, he was close, right?
Yeah.
Right. He was right there. So Saul goes back, resolves the whole Philistine thing, and somebody on Saul's team tells him, "Hey, I know where David is." So Saul grabs his army, 3,000 men, jumps back out and goes after David. Now they're in a desert and they're on the western shore of the Dead Sea. Saul's got 3,000 men. David's got about 600 men.
Yep.
So we got a little bit of a problem there if you're David.
Yeah.
And Saul has to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right? So he has to relieve himself, and so he goes into a cave.
Yeah.
And it turns out David and some of his men are in the cave.
Hiding in the cave.
Hiding in the cave. Can you... Here he comes. Shh.
Yeah, right.
Imagine how dark it was, and they had to be, I'm sure, way back in the cave.
Yeah.
But it was close enough, so as Saul was relieving himself, David actually cuts a piece of cloth off of Saul's coat.
Yeah, so like we do, you took off his outer jacket or whatever and set it off to the side.
Yep.
And
Yep. But as he was coming in, all David's men were like, "This is God's will.
Perfect, yeah.
This is perfect. God wants you to kill Saul.
Yeah.
How can you not think that way?"
Right.
And David didn't think that way.
Yeah.
And David is still of the mind of, this is God's anointed one.
because and it's true. It's
Right.
true. Now, we do get into today. I hear this a lot, especially with certain religious groups, certain churches that have the concept that the preacher or the pastor or the bishop or whatever is God's anointed, and you're not allowed to speak against the anointed one. And they quote verses from it: "Touch not the Lord's anointed one." That's not what we're doing. Saul was anointed by Samuel to be king, and even though David was as well.
Well, even more, anointed by Samuel on God's command.
On God's command, right?
Yeah.
On God's command. So, and David recognizes that, and he is not. I mean, for being a man of war, as we watch him grow up, and for being a warrior, and apparently a little bit of a temper, or a little bit of a whatever, emotional at the very least, right? He's really measured in these early days, where he is trying to obey and not jump faster than God. And I think that's worth noticing.
Yeah, so Saul leaves, and you got to believe his men were around there. When he gets to a safe distance, David calls out to him.
Yeah, pops out of the mouth of the cave. He's like, "Hey,
my lord, O king, hello!" And then he kneels down and bows down on the ground, right, as a act of submission to him. And basically says, "Look, why do you listen to men that say I'm trying to kill you? I just could have killed you, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And here's how close I was." And I'm sure Saul was like,
that was my favorite jacket.
yeah. So Saul actually starts weeping.
Yeah.
Right? And he seems to have a moment of clarity in here. And he says, "You've acted way more honorably than I have." And they seem to make up, and David's kind of keeping him mad.
Well, and as he
with
should,
good reason.
right?
Yeah. But something big happens in here too. Saul says, "I realize you will be king." Right? Saul knows God has taken this away from him. Saul knows it's just a matter of time. He may not like it. He's certainly fighting it, but he gets it.
Yeah.
But he asks David a request, right? Promise me that you will not kill my family.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. But why that request?
Well, I think first of all, if you think, just thinking ancient cultures, a new king comes in, the first thing they're going to do is wipe out the family. You know, less of a risk of an assassination attempt, a coup, try to get the dynasty back, right? But here, under Israel, we have to remember that, if he wiped out his whole family, there's tribal lands, there's family property, there's all this within the tribe of Benjamin, which is already a small tribe.
Right.
So he'd be wiping out a good chunk of a tribe of Benjamin. And so we have to be very careful under the Mosaic law, even that
You didn't go too far.
Yeah, that we don't go too far, family property and everything. So that was probably part of it as well.
Okay.
As well as just begging for his life, for his family's life.
Yeah, and this comes up again next week too. So good, nice laying stones down there. All right, chapter 25. I think is a great chapter to read, and we're just going to hit the high points because that's all we're trying to do here. Right.
This is one of my favorite chapters from Sunday school. When I was growing up hearing these Bible stories, I just thought was very cool.
Oh, with David's interaction with
Nabal and Abigail.
Yeah. Okay, so the first thing is Samuel dies.
Yeah,
and you go, Samuel. Oh, it's his book.
It's like we haven't heard from this guy for chapter upon chapter.
Exactly. So then it goes into a long story. David has an interaction with really two people. One is a foolish man, like you said, Nabal, and his name means foolish. Yeah. So it's really not a surprise.
Yeah.
There.
So was that his real name? Was that his nickname? Everybody just called him fool. Whatever.
Yeah.
Behind his back.
So he's harsh and foolish. I mean, he's described that way, but his wife is wise and beautiful, and he treats David harshly.
Yeah.
And David takes exception to it.
Well, yeah.
Which he should.
Yeah.
And David is going to retaliate.
Well, and this guy's rich. He's wealthy. He's a very well-known businessman in the area, and David has done a little bit of security work for him, and so he thought, at least we're on good terms, right?
Right.
So he asked.
He makes a request.
Yeah, could you spare anything? We're getting a little hungry out here in the desert. Could you spare anything? And Nabal is just...
It gets shut down.
Shuts him down.
Yeah,
completely.
big time.
Yeah.
So Abigail, Nabal's wife, hears this. She immediately starts cooking. She puts the kibosh on everything. Right. And she takes off with some animals and meets David and his army as he's coming into town. Yeah. And says, forgive me, Lord, makes the peace, gives him food. Yeah. Food to eat, and really smooths things over. Yeah. At least David stops. Yeah. at that point. Yeah. So Abigail then tells her husband.
Yeah, the next day.
Yeah, what happened, and the husband actually has a stroke.
Yeah.
And dies.
Yeah.
And he's so choked up about it, which leaves Abigail available for marriage again.
That's true.
So David marries Abigail.
Yep.
And you can read about it.
Yeah.
In there. To me, it gets a little odd after that.
You think? The last couple of verses of the chapter?
Yeah. So it's maybe you'll have the same thing. So you read the last couple of verses and you go, what did I miss? And so you start backing up and read it again. It's like, I don't think I missed anything. So it says, David was married to Saul's second daughter.
Yeah.
But the end of chapter 25 says, Saul gave her to someone else.
Yeah.
And David married some other lady.
Yeah.
I need a little help here. What's going on here?
I don't see the problem. So Saul had given his second daughter, right, Michal.
Yeah. Well, he first was trying to give his first daughter, and David said no. Right. Second.
Yeah. So his younger daughter, Michal. And so David marries her, but Saul's goal was to get her to entrap David. This was a sabotage thing, a sort of an espionage thing. Yeah. Turns out David and Michal actually love each other, and she helps him escape from Saul.
Of killing,
and you can remember this instead of letting Saul's men kill him, right? Well, to Saul that just ticked him off, and since David was on the run anyway, he just, basically as king, he annulled that marriage and he married her off to somebody else. Right. I mean, that's all he did. So technically, David at this point is now unmarried. So he marries Abigail. Okay. No problem. She's wise and beautiful, and like you said, she was available.
Yeah.
He also marries Ahinoam from Jezreel, up north, and this is where people start to have a little bit of a problem. Okay, but notice it's never condemned in here. God doesn't say anything about it, and there are all sorts of. In fact, he never condemns it. All sorts of other things that go into this. David was wealthy enough to have two separate marriages, two separate families. He could support them. And in fact, as he became more wealthy, he married other women as well and had more than just these two marriages and was able to support them. And again, it's never condemned. Yeah. So
either this week or next week, it says, and David had many sons, and it starts listing them with the wives.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is that throughout these next couple of chapters, it's going to specify his two wives, his two wives, his two wives. This is not a mistake. It's not a typo. He had two wives, and in not a single one of these chapters or these mentions does Samuel, who is dead, any of the other prophets, God, anybody say you shouldn't have done that. Okay? There's no condemnation for that. And some people are going to have a problem with that. And my response is, we can talk about it, okay? Because you're not going to find a clear-cut condemnation in here the way you might expect.
Right.
So,
I'm just going to keep plowing forward.
Yeah.
In chapter 26, Saul tries to kill David again.
what?
I know, with 3,000 soldiers.
Patched up.
David and one of his guards sneak into camp, and they find Saul sleeping in the open.
Yeah.
He's got a chance to kill him.
Yeah.
And the guy with Saul's like, do it. I'll do it. Do it. Give me the spear. But David again doesn't want to kill the anointed one. So instead he takes his spear and his water jug, as proof. Here's how close I was.
This is how close I was. Yeah.
Then once again he goes a safe distance. Oh, Saul, shows him what he has there, and Saul's with his general Abner. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I love David.
He gives a little chide too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. David's like, I thought you were a good protector,
dude.
There's a little bit of humor going on in here too.
Yeah, and Abner does show up again.
Abner actually turns out to be a really, really good guy.
Yeah. So again, Saul felt remorse for his actions. Again, I'm so sorry. I was trying to kill you again.
Yeah.
And David again stayed away.
Yeah.
So I love chapter 27 because David finally comes to the realization that Saul's going to eventually kill him.
I don't think I'm going to be safe here.
Yeah. So maybe I should go to plan B.
Yeah.
So actually what he does is he goes back to Goliath's hometown.
Which he's been before.
Yep. Which is in the land of Philistine. So he's outside of Saul's immediate reach.
Yeah.
Obviously it's close to
They're next door to each other, right?
Yeah. And he makes a bargain with the king there. And David promises, I won't be in your way, but if he could use the house or use the town to hide him and his army of 600 people.
Yeah.
And
now, some people have problems with this.
Well,
because
it's kind of weird, right? It's the enemy, right?
Well, yeah. Are you not trusting God to take care of you? But again, I think this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. There's a principle of wisdom, and he knows he can keep running around the desert, and eventually Saul's going to catch him because he was close.
Yeah.
Or he can actually make a wise decision, and he'll use that. We'll see next week. He'll actually use that for Israel's benefit, and in fact, Saul's benefit as well. Yeah. While he is hiding here in
even in this week for the next 16 to 18 months, David and his army, they attacked the surrounding areas and wiped out Philistines in camps, and then went back to the Philistine king.
Yeah.
Hey, we got rid of some riffraff for you.
Yeah, right. Didn't tell him it's his riffraff. So where you been? What you been doing?
David says, I'm attacking outlying cities of Judah. Philistine.
Which technically is true. It's in the broader land of Judah, but they're not Israelites I'm attacking. I just leave that part out.
Yeah. So kind of kind of cool here.
Yeah, which, by the way, let's bring this up again because we have talked about it. And again, you might have a problem. Oh, he's lying and all this. These are enemies. These are God's enemies. These are Israel's enemies. And David is behind enemy lines. They're still at war.
Well, and I was just going to say that too. And they're at war.
And they're out, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the Philistines are still attacking Israel. Saul is still fighting them. David's in the mix. So, like we said last time, a few weeks ago, this is a war. He's deceiving the enemy. Okay? And if people have a problem with that, God doesn't. And again, God's not condemning this, and in fact, he'll use it for his purposes. So,
All right, good.
yeah, just a reminder, we have run into this before, and David's using it.
So we end this week's reading with David relatively safe. Saul isn't out of the picture by any means, but he's not this direct threat that he has been.
Yeah.
And David is using his time and kind of biding his time.
Yeah, and he has the king of Gath there gave him a city and some surrounding land, and so David is starting to be able to build some forces and get a little bit of rest that he's going to need to have.
Exactly. And next week we end, right? I think we have 3 or 4 chapters left, and we kind of wrap up at least the first part of the story.
Yeah, well, First Samuel, not second, right?
Yeah, true.
Well, hopefully you enjoy some of these things, and we ran into some sort of troublesome things today that you might have issues with. Feel free to contact us. We'd love to talk to you about those in more detail if you'd like. As always, questions and comments, we do love those. Subscribe and like and do all the things as you share it with your friends and family, and we will pick up here and finish 1 Samuel next time.
Bye, everybody.